everyone. It's our first official live stream of the summer. We are less than 3 months from the primary. It's time to get it. It's time to get serious. It's time to fight. We're ready. I hope you're ready too. I feel like I need to start this off by saying I am on dog watching duty this evening, which usually I've got coverage for that. So if you hear anybody barking or you hear anybody whining, it's Oscar. I've given him a treat. I'm hoping that that's enough to keep him entertained. So put some good vibes out there for us, and let's hope that that is the truth. All right, what do I want to start with this week? Where I want to start is to basically say that I've had a very, as I mentioned, it's Monday, June 22nd. Tomorrow is June 23rd. It's election day in a lot of states. And I have a ton of brand new Congress slate mates that are running in their primaries tomorrow. So I want to rattle off some names at you. If you've got time to maybe help them kind of do their final push, final donations, final get out the vote efforts, those people I would be looking at. For the Senate, we have Charles Booker storming into his primary with tons of momentum down in Kentucky. The House, there are a ton of great candidates that are BNC candidates. So Jamal Bowman, Lauren Ashcraft, Lindsey Boylan, Shaniat Chowdhury, Melanie DeRijo, Mel Gagarin, Isaiah James, Tomas Ramos, all of them fellow slate mates. Happy to see the work that they've put in through their campaigns, hoping to see them take their districts by storm tomorrow and win. Also in New York, not necessarily a BNC slate mate, but Semelise Lopez is also running in her primary tomorrow. So there are a ton of great candidates out there. If you are looking for something to do tomorrow, absolutely help them get out the vote and make sure that they get as many votes as they can. What have I been up to? So I had a very, I'll say, Sussex County centric weekend and start to my week. I visited a couple places yesterday. So yesterday I was in Milford and Laurel. I visited, thanks to friends of the campaign and supporters, Rose and Erica, who connected me to people in the Haitian Creole community here in Delaware. So I want to thank Pastor Amos down in Milford, who invited me to come and speak to his congregation. Thank you to the congregation for giving me the time to speak, for offering translation services to make sure that we could all connect and have good conversations, and to hear what we're running on and what we're fighting for and why we think we need to see someone different in the Senate representing us as Delawareans. The Haitian community, from what I'm hearing, feels very unrepresented. They are looking for electeds to even recognize them, to even speak to them directly, to come and listen to the needs that they have. I heard directly from them how few of their representatives have even shown up for them, even just once, even made a phone call. They don't necessarily even know the faces of the people who are representing them because the effort has not been made to make that connection to their community. When we talk through the things that are important to them, they shouldn't have to fight to get language services and translations of things like COVID resources, which did eventually come out but needed to be kind of asked for repeatedly. Any state communications are not necessarily translated into Haitian Creole. Same thing for doctor's services. Another visit that we made in Laurel was to a medical clinic called Tabitha Medical Clinic, which serves everyone, but is really focused on ensuring that the Haitian Creole community has a medical clinic that can serve their needs, that can speak to them. And they spoke specifically about how if their patients need to go to the hospital or another doctor, often it's incredibly challenging to ensure that they can even have a conversation with their doctor. So while they might be able to go to that visit, they might not actually be able to get the information they need from the doctor because of these language barriers. And these are the things that they're looking at and saying, we need these things. We need people looking out for us and fighting for us. The same thing goes for ESL classes, but ensuring that they are culturally competent ESL classes that take into account the culture that they're coming from and the culture that they live in currently, which does not really exist specifically for Creole here in Delaware. And the other thing that absolutely comes up, I mean, ensuring healthcare, good wages, good jobs. I mean, so many of our Haitian neighbors are workers at the chicken processing plants in our state. And they need us to stand up for them. They need us to stand up for their worker rights and good conditions in their workplaces, which is what I did today by joining the rally in Selbyville for UFCW Local 27. So this local represents workers at the Mount Air chicken processing plant in Selbyville. And you've definitely heard us talk about Mount Air before. Its owner, Ron Cameron, is a huge political donor. He's made large donations to the likes of Donald Trump and the National Chicken Council, who in turn makes large donations to my opponent. And Mount Air has been working with the National Right to Work Foundation to decertify the union at its plant. And if you've watched the video that I just put out last week about Taft-Hartley and wanting to repeal that act, you've probably heard me talk about Right to Work. And if you haven't watched that, I definitely recommend it. Right to Work has been an initiative that was essentially Taft-Hartley paved the way for it. And it has been an initiative to undermine the power of unions for decades. And it has really taken hold in a lot of states, particularly with the help of this foundation, the National Right to Work Foundation. So they are working to get the union out of this plant right now. And we've seen that this plant needs its union more than ever. I mean, the way that Mount Air chooses to treat its workers has been put on display, particularly during this pandemic. They've refused to protect workers by doing a deep clean of the plant. They've actually hidden how many cases are in the plant. They haven't reported out to the union new case numbers since the end of March. They went so far as to dock people's pay for the personal protective equipment that is required to do their job safely. So charging people out of their already too low wages to pay for masks and the gowns that they need to wear to do their jobs. These are not things that they take home and use. These are things that they use to do their job. They are not their personal property. They are used for work, and yet their pay was docked for them. They were also not able to socially distance, particularly in the meetings that the Mount Air made them attend to hear persuasive arguments against the union. You know, not able to get more than 2 feet away from each other. And they were also denied the paid time off that they were guaranteed when they were sick. So not getting full 10 days off, only getting 5 days, not getting paid time as they were guaranteed. So we have seen how Mount Air treats its workers. And why? Well, as I mentioned, a lot of these workers are vulnerable people. Many of them may be immigrants. They may not speak English. They are clearly seen by Mount Air as expendable and replaceable, and we have seen that in their actions during this crisis. So this is precisely why we need to build labor power in our country. When we protect unions, when we protect workers, when they are strong, we get better safety, better health, better conditions, and better pay. All of those things are stronger too. And that is why we talk so much on this campaign and why I'm running on this campaign to talk about worker power and union power and worker co-ops and workplace democracy as a whole, where workers actually have a say and autonomy in their workplace, because that is the only way that we are going to ensure that we have the conditions and the pay that we deserve for the work that we all do. And it's the only way that we are going to help fight back against this vast income inequality that we are seeing in our country at historic levels, worse than it's ever been. Unions help us fight back against that, and we have to stand with them and their workers. Okay, that's my intro for the day. If you got questions, pop them in the chat. I've got a couple that come in, like just from people reaching out or offline or just during the week, so I'll hit those first. And then if you have a few more questions, I can get to them as we go through. So definitely post those up. So one of the ones that came in since last week is that people were asking, like, what are these phone calls that I'm getting that don't really say they're from the Coons campaign, but seem like they're from the Coons campaign, and they're about you, and whether or not, Chris Coons should support certain issues. So I've heard a lot of those questions, and if you've gotten those calls, maybe this sounds familiar to you. I personally have not received these calls, but what I've been told is that there's quite a few of them actually happening. People are getting a series of different questions. The caller asks a series of questions to essentially gauge what parts of my platform they think they can make effective attack ads or attack messaging against. And then they're also gauging what it is that they think Chris Coons' platform should be. What should, what's testing well with people? What should he actually build his values and his campaign around? What policies would he stop fighting for? And what policies would he add based on these polls? I want to note that often these are called push polls, and they are not necessarily used to really get an idea of who you want to vote for. They are often used to try to persuade you away from voting for a certain person. So one of the ones that I heard from people was that the caller was actually attacking me for my work, essentially going after my profession, going after the company that I work for. Frankly, going back to what we were just talking about, I think it's really kind of sad to see Democratic leaders attacking workers for their work. Like most people, I have a job because I need to be able to have income to pay my bills, and I don't have a say in the choices that my employer makes. And I think it's very odd to try to attack me on that line. I think most workers feel like they don't have a say in the things that their company does. Plus, everything was very vague and unclear. It seemed like it was trying to sow doubt and sow rumors rather than being specific about anything that I personally have done. There were also some that were talking about, some of my stances. And I believe in fighting for policies that are going to build a better state and a better country for us. And that is why I support the policies that I do. I don't support Medicare for all just because it's popular or just because it's polled well. I support it because I recognize that this is what our country needs, that it will be better for us, both for our health, for our overall well-being, and it costs less money. So I'm not coming out with the policies that I'm fighting for simply because I want to do what's popular. I'm doing it because it's what aligns with my vision of the world. No amount of polling would frankly convince me otherwise and would make me change my mind. I don't have to poll test the things that I'm running on because these things align with my values, and I know it's what we should be fighting for, and it's what I hear from voters, what we should be fighting for. So I know that these are the right things. I don't have to pay, frankly, thousands of dollars to hire these out-of-state consultant groups to run these polls for me and waste that money to figure out what I should believe in. I already know those things. And that is money that could have been spent hiring local organizers for his campaign, like we're doing. We hire people in state to be organizers for our campaign. We pay them living wages, and we invest that money in our community because, again, that's what our values are. That's what we believe in, and that's how we're using our campaign. And frankly, when you run a poll trying to push me as quote-unquote out of the mainstream for supporting things like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal and decriminalization of drug addiction and use, that's not out of the mainstream. These are things that have been studied by multiple organizations, University of Delaware being one of them. And the majority of Delawareans, not just Americans, the majority of Delawareans support the Green New Deal. The majority of Delawareans support legalizing cannabis. The majority of Delawareans support Medicare for all and decriminalization of drugs. So when you run a poll telling people that anyone who holds those views is out of the mainstream, you're lying to people as well. And clearly, the person who opposes those policies is actually the person who is out of step with what Delawareans want. And I am running on the platform that I believe in and that is aligned with the values of people in Delaware. So if you get those calls, please continue to let us know. We're always curious what's being said, and I will always address those questions if you have them. All right, so something else that kind of has come up a bit, this idea that I support the platform, but is there a chance you would lose in a general election? Don't we need to elect conservative Democrats in a primary so that we can appeal to Republicans and maybe win them over and win a general election? The short answer here is no, we don't have to do that. I don't think that we should run scared in a state like Delaware that is incredibly Democratic leaning. We are, by some counts, the 8th most Democratic state in the country. Why would we be running conservative people in this state? Our voter registration just greatly outweighs in favor of Democrats over Republicans. So we have a huge voter advantage already. And on top of that, I've personally, as well as other people on this campaign, have converted people from independents or Republicans to switch to Democrats to vote for this platform, because it speaks to the issues that they actually face in their lives. It speaks to the fact that you don't make nearly enough money and you need to work more than one job. It speaks to the fact that you can't actually afford to get the health care that you need because you pay for insurance instead of paying for health care, and that insurance blocks you from even getting the care that you need. It speaks to the fact that our state will be 10% underwater if we don't combat climate change. So these are things that people already recognize as issues, and when we speak to them directly and we speak to the problems that they face and the experience that they have in their lives, it wins people over. So we don't have to run scared here. If anything, we should be running proud on this platform because it wins votes. We've talked to voters who are less likely to turn out since we launched in November. People who have felt dejected or haven't felt like there's something for them to actually vote for. And they get excited. And those are the types of candidates that we should be running, because that's how you actually expand the Democratic Party. We need to be focusing on bringing more people into the party. We need to be focusing on getting more people engaged. And when you continually run people who don't talk about their life experience and don't talk about how we actually need to change the material conditions of their life and make their lives better, it's not exciting. It doesn't bring new people in. You just end up kind of fighting for the same set of votes over and over, and there's all these people just sitting on the sidelines watching and waiting for someone to actually pull them in. And that's what this campaign is doing. So I don't think we have to run in fear. I think that this moment in particular has opened the eyes of a lot of people in our country, in our state, and has shown them that we can and should demand so much more from our government. There was an article that came out just either yesterday or today that showed that poverty actually decreased in April and May, in the middle of a pandemic, with people suffering from unemployment. And why is that? Because we offered not even really strong, but at least decent social programs. We expanded unemployment insurance. We added additional payments so that unemployment insurance is actually enough for people to get by. And what we see is that government programs are actually capable of ending poverty. We've known this forever, but we need to elect people who are going to actually fight to enact that. So these are the policies we need. This is the moment to actually be running on these policies, and we can really use this to our advantage to elect people from Delaware and across the country who are going to fight for it. So I don't think that we need to be afraid. We need to be strong, and we need to talk to people about why this is the right thing for them and for our country, and why this is what we need to fight for together. Okay, next question. Okay, Linda, you had a few of her concerns. There's a ton here, so I'm going to try to hit on them as best I can. gun reform, police reform, schools on lockdown while in session, and security, having cops and security in them, drug addiction, how do we actually assist people with drug problems, um, homelessness, human trafficking, healthcare for all, clean air, and there's a lot of issues here. And I thank you so much, Linda, for sharing all of these, because this is exactly how I make sure that we are running on the right things. When I hear from people, I mean, this is what we do when we phone bank. This is what we do when we're knocking on doors, right? It's here's who I am, here's what I believe, but what's important to you. So these things are so valuable. So thank you for sharing them. I completely agree that gun reform and police accountability are super important. And I think we have to take advantage of this moment. We cannot lose the moment that we have right now to make change on these issues in particular. I mean, there have been organizers doing this work and pushing for particularly police reform for so long that we have the ideas. We know what we need to do. We don't have to do more studies on what will make our communities safer. We can just enact the policies that are there. So I think it's incredibly important to seize on the moment that we are in right now. And yes, like, change what policing is, invest in our communities so that we actually drive down the root causes of crime. You mentioned education, invest in education. You mentioned healthcare. Absolutely. These are the things: healthcare, homelessness, education. Right now we treat addiction like a crime rather than a public health problem. These are all of the things that I completely agree need to be addressed, need to be changed. We have the means to fund programming that will change these situations. We can end homelessness. The estimate is that it would take $20 billion to end homelessness. That is what we added into our military budget at the end of last year without batting an eyelash. We can absolutely end homelessness. We need people who want to do it. Universal health care to ensure that people get both the physical and mental care that they need. And same thing with addiction. Addiction services need to be included in universal health care so that if people need that help, they can actually get it, rather than relying on a prison system that locks them up and does not provide them the services they need to fight that addiction. So I completely agree that is why a lot of these things are really central pieces of my platform as well. All right, so let's see. All right, so Sophia asks, what's your plan for appealing to Black voters and citizens? I think first and foremost, it's really important, particularly for white people, to recognize and acknowledge that Black people are not a monolith. You hear people say things like the Black vote, and that is not a singular thing. There are a lot of different dimensions among like every other group of people, among Black people, and I don't necessarily hear a single unified set of policy demands. Depending on who you are in your life, you have different priorities based on your experiences, your class, perhaps even your immigration status, your sexual orientation or gender identity, age. All of these things are factors. So I think I try to be really thoughtful about not simply saying like these are the things that are all Black people are looking for or interested in. That being said, it's obviously like incredibly important. Black people in our state are a large part of our population. So it's important that that's who we're talking to. So on day one of this campaign, and since, every week of this campaign, I've spent several hours, reaching out to Black faith leaders, Black labor leaders, Black people who are working on housing rights and health advocacy and education advocacy and activism, and the people who are organizing around those issues. Because, as I said, it's incredibly important to me to have those conversations and not necessarily go into them saying like, hey, I'm really looking for you to get people to vote for me. Much more taking the tact of like, how can the work that we're doing with our campaign boost the work that you're doing or support what you've been fighting for however long. And I have found that to be kind of surprising to people, honestly. I think most people, when they get that phone call, expect you to simply say, like, hey, how can we get the people in your community to vote for us? And that's not the conversation I'm having with people. It's much more about what is the work that you're doing and how can we use the strength of our campaign to boost it or to work it into our platform. As well, outside of leaders and organizers, talking to voters. Like, I spent the most of my canvassing time in majority Black neighborhoods. And it's important that those are the voices that get centered and those are the concerns of the folks that we are focusing on, because they have been disproportionately disenfranchised by our political system. And right now we are in the process of hiring additional organizers here in Delaware and prioritizing hiring Black organizers. Because we don't, as I said, like, we're not trying to spend money on polling. We are trying to invest in the communities of organizers here in Delaware, and connect people and make sure that we are running on the things that are important to them, and ensuring that we are hiring people that come from the communities that we are looking to serve and who we are looking to make sure that we are pulling ideas from and building our platform around. So it's been really a concerted effort since the beginning to ensure that we aren't ignoring the voices of Black people in our state, and that we aren't simply looking to the voters who are regular voters. We're really trying to say who feels left out and why do they feel left out. And unfortunately, that is often a lot of Black people, and saying how can we bring them in and who can we connect with to bring them in and make sure that we are actually running on things that will make their lives better and improve their lives, and they see as issues that they are facing, and offering actual solutions to those issues. Okay, how do we get state contracts to Black and Brown owned businesses? I think this is sort of, for me, it comes up even a little bit of a higher level. This ties into all of the existing inequities in our society, right? Like, and I think it can't just be a single approach. I think it starts even further back than when we have a contract. I think we need to make sure that we are giving kids that are coming from Black and Brown neighborhoods an actual equitable education that is funded equitably and delivers solid education, and that needs to extend from pre-K all the way through college, so that more people who want to build a business feel that they're capable of doing it and that they actually have the skills that they need to do that. We have to make sure that we are dealing with inequities that exist in healthcare and housing, which contribute to having fewer minority-owned businesses than we should in our society. And we need to make sure that the communities where Black and Brown people live are in a place where they can support businesses, so that we're talking about even just infrastructure things. How do we ensure that roads are taken care of and buildings are taken care of, that people are able to earn a living wage, like all of these things that factor into businesses being successful. When people are making better wages, there are more people that have money left at the end of the month so that they can go spend on businesses. So these are all things that I think help just create the environment for a stronger economy as a whole. But specifically talking about, like, how do we get these contracts? Like, we need to have an economy, particularly at the state level, that is focused more on local businesses and not bringing in multinational chains or out of state. It really needs to be about, like, the small businesses here and making sure that we are focusing on them and their work. We need to have particularly when it comes to financing these businesses, right now it's a lot harder as a Black owner or a brown owner to even get lending or low interest loans. Like, that is something that we could absolutely be doing to strengthen those businesses, to ensure that they are there and ready to take those contracts. And I think that, like, we should be looking at giving our money and our contracts, as I said, my dog is here, but we should be giving our, oh please, sorry about that. But like, state and public money should go to large companies, out-of-state companies, franchises, very last. We should always be looking for a local person. We should always be looking for someone who it came from the community that we are trying to give that contract in. Like, these are the ways that you actually can structure things to make sure that you are prioritizing people who have otherwise been disadvantaged in this system that we've had. It gets to be very crony-esque. It gets to be very who do you know? And I think we have to be building systems that prevent that as well. Don't get a puppy. Okay, hold on a second. All right. How do you approach ensuring equity in Delaware schools? So from the federal level, I think we absolutely need to be providing more money to states. Right now, Delaware gets only 10% of its education funding from the federal government. I think those numbers should be much higher. I think we need our federal government to be prioritizing education, rather than leaving our states in a position where they have to come up with the money. They have much less flexibility and ability to do that. States rely on revenues and are not currency issuers. So they're not in a position to do the same things that the federal government can do with the power that the federal government has and the funds and the resources that the federal government has. So absolutely, number one, I think the federal government needs to be providing more money directly to the states for schooling. And then at the state level, I think we have to talk about electing candidates who see funding our schools equitably as a priority. We need weighted funding so that we can actually get services into schools that need them the most. When students are learning English, when students are coming from lower income neighborhoods or from places where they're experiencing trauma, like the work that they need and the support that they need is much greater than students that are coming from, well-resourced neighborhoods. I hope this is enjoyable for everybody to watch me fighting my dog. So we absolutely need to elect candidates like, Medina Wilson-Anton and Larry Lambert and Marie Pinkney and Eric Morrison, who are talking about education equity and who recognize that we need more teacher diversity, that we need culturally competent education. We need more counselors and nurses. When we lose funding for our schools, we lose the things that make it so that kids can get a good education, right? We have schools where there aren't counselors. There sometimes aren't nurses. We have schools where the class sizes are so large that a teacher can't give students the independent and unique attention that they need. And sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes they just need that extra attention, but it's incredibly difficult to do that when you're talking about a class of 25 to 30 kids, particularly when those kids have different abilities or coming from different backgrounds. So we can absolutely help fund these things from the federal level, but we need the people at the state level who are going to focus on putting those funds into that type of programming that makes a more equitable education. All right, do you have a response to the racists on 95 today? So I only saw this right before I started this live. So I don't know exactly who these people were. I saw a sign that basically was essentially alleging that Black people are acting like victims and that they're marching against that. Yeah, my response is just mostly disgust. Honestly, I think it's a good reminder though that these people exist here, and that we have to be doing all that we can to stamp out racism. That we should not be giving platforms to people who push these views. We should not be giving any sort of space to elected officials or candidates who hold these views. We absolutely need to say directly that this is completely inexcusable, and that we need to be enacting policy that is expressly anti-racist and actually undoes the harm that we have caused over years and years, hundreds of years of white supremacy in our country. This is my friend. Hopefully, Bill will come home soon and relieve me of my dog duties. Oh, maybe he'll come up. All right, so Michael asks, can you touch more on guns? Yeah, absolutely. So, I really see gun violence as a symptom of a larger issue within our country. We absolutely have far too much gun violence in our country. It's indefensible. There's no realm. There's no way to excuse it away. There's no way to make it seem like this is okay. I really think that what's often called common sense gun legislation is important. I don't think that assault weapons should be sold to people. But my opponent has actually opposed automatic buybacks of those weapons, calling that too extreme of a viewpoint. But like I said, I really look at this as a root cause issue. What is leading to all of this gun violence? What is leading to people feeling like that is the way to solve problems, or the way to, to eventually solve problems? And, sorry. I think that we really need to focus on things that are going to create a more equitable society as a whole. Because I think that is the root cause of a lot of the things we're seeing, like gun violence. People are less likely to commit violent crimes when they are living good lives. We can guarantee a good standard of living, an ability to live with dignity in our country, including healthcare and wages and clean environments, good schooling and education, and giving people hope, frankly, for a future. Then I think that those are the ways that you can address the causes of gun violence. Legislation of regulation of guns is not going to necessarily get rid of the reason that people are picking it up in the first place. And I think we have to do both of those things to actually eradicate this problem. All right. I will not be doing this again with the dog. I apologize, everyone. So Austin asks, can you touch a little on the Equality Act and what you'll do for LGBTQ advocacy? So yeah, I've talked about this a bit. I think we have to be doing more to protect LGBTQIA folks from discrimination in particular. It's still baked into our systems and institutions. We did not solve this problem when we won marriage equality. The issues go so much deeper. The discrimination goes so much deeper. There's still discrimination in healthcare. We had executive guidance or Health and Human Services guidance just last week, I believe it was, that doctors can refuse care to people based on gender identity. That is absolutely something that we need to codify in law as being illegal. That is discrimination, and we have to say it as such. Same thing comes with housing, jobs. People still being able to hopefully not jobs now, but housing insecurity. The fact that a landlord can discriminate against you based on your gender identity or your sexual orientation. We need to make sure that's illegal. And we also really need to make sure that we can actually enforce these laws, Because particularly when it comes to things like labor law and discriminating on a job, if we don't have people who can actually ensure that these laws are being followed, we might as well not have them. So any law, particularly against something like discrimination, needs to come with real enforcement chops, because otherwise it's essentially a law that can't be enacted or applied. If you're discriminated against in a rental application because you're gay, but you also are unable to hire a lawyer to fight that, or are unable to even recognize that is illegal, if we make it illegal, like, that law is no good for you. So we have to make sure that we build out these laws. We guarantee that people are guaranteed civil representation in civil cases, and that we have enforcement structures in place to actually ensure that these laws are being followed. As far as particular policies that I am fighting for, I think we absolutely need to protect LGBTQ youth in particular. I believe that we need a federal ban on conversion therapy. That should be absolutely illegal. It's abusive and it's harmful, and there are people that are in our government who actually believe in it, and I think that is vile and it should be banned. I think any sort of gender affirming surgery or treatments should be covered under Medicare for All legislation. Both your sexual orientation and your gender identity need to be protected classes under anti-discrimination laws. And I've talked about housing, like, particularly when it comes to LGBTQ youth. A lot of kids who come out to family are thrown out. And when we lack a housing guarantee, they lack a place to go. And we have an epidemic of homelessness among like LGBTQ youth in particular. So we absolutely need to be protecting those kids. All right. And then with regards to the Equality Act, I kind of mentioned before, the Supreme Court made a good decision last week. I think it's a good step, but we can't just rely on the court and these fights and coming down to just the court hopefully making the right decision, quote unquote, particularly when we have a president and a Senate that helps him pack it with these far-right extremist judges, not just at the Supreme Court level, but all the way up and down. So I think we need legislation that truly codifies this. It's kind of what I'm saying about discrimination. Like, we can't rely on court judgments and things that could potentially be appealed or continue to be fought. It needs to be codified into law that it is illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ people. I really love that this makes me look very normal. Okay. All right, so Julie asked, what are your policies on housing? I'm particularly concerned about the economic impact of the virus and what will happen unemployment and the moratorium on evictions ends. Yeah, so I think Julie is hitting on an incredibly important point. We had a public health crisis that because of our government's failed response, we allowed to cascade into a economic crisis, and I'm really concerned that it will now turn into a housing crisis. In the state of Delaware, we have an eviction moratorium in place. Go. All right. Excuse me. Why would it be All right. No more puppy fights. All right. So we have an eviction moratorium, but basically that will only last for 30 days after the state of emergency is lifted. So we're still in the state of emergency, but basically we don't know how long that's actually going to last. And then people who potentially haven't been able to pay their rent during this entire time because they lost their job or the extra unemployment ran out, are going to be in a place where they need to figure out how to pay potentially 3-4 months missed rent in 30 days. If you missed it while this pandemic was going on, where are you going to come up with multiple months rent? People are not going to get back to work that quickly. They're not going to necessarily have that money to make those payments. So I'm incredibly concerned that we are going to see a housing crisis ensue as a result of coronavirus. So I think that I look at housing as a basic human right. Like, we can absolutely be guaranteeing that every single person in this country is housed. Um, we need to have a federal government that invests heavily in federal housing programs. And I want to note that, like, our federal government does invest heavily in federal housing programs, but it's not necessarily in the right place. It's not in public housing. The budget for housing and urban development is about 40 million or 45 million, or excuse me, $1 billion. But the money that we put into the mortgage interest deduction is about 70. So we're spending more on a tax deduction for homeowners than we are spending on an entire housing department. And that's a place where, like, we can absolutely be making a different decision. We could be funding housing and urban development with far more money, giving them far more ability to actually invest in public housing. And I really believe that those housing programs, like, should not be means tested. Anyone who needs housing should be able to get it through a federal housing program. We need to renovate the existing units that we have and build more. I've talked about something called the Faircloth Amendment, which actually prevents us from adding to our public housing stock. We need to repeal that and allow the government to add more stock. We have a low income housing shortage, and we can fix that problem. We can't rely on real estate developers to fix that problem for us. They have proven they're not going to do it. It has to be on us to fix it for ourselves. I believe that tenants need a Bill of Rights to protect them in their relationships with landlords and then give them more power in those relationships, as well as encouraging tenants unions and tenants coming together so that they can collectively bargain with their landlords, particularly if you're living in a larger building. Same thing, supporting first-time home buyers, particularly those from marginalized communities. If people are looking to buy a home, how can we facilitate that? We still need to fight back against redlining and racial segregation that happens in housing. And there's still, frankly, predatory and subprime lending practices that go on that put people into loan products that are to their disadvantage, and make it so that while they can maybe get into that home, keeping it becomes increasingly difficult as those payments change or as their rates change. So those are things that absolutely need to be ended as well. Adam asks, what are your thoughts on the false registration campaign that TikTok teens and K-pop fans employed to try and derail Trump's Tulsa rally? It's an interesting question. I think there was a lot of debate about this the last couple days. Like, people were like, well, questioning. If anyone doesn't know, I guess I can give some background here. Trump held a rally in Tulsa on Saturday, and his team ahead of the rally was like, we have 300,000 ticket requests. This is out of control. This is going to be the biggest rally. They set up all this overflow space because they were anticipating, like, people not being able to fit in the arena. And what was actually going on is that a bunch of Zoomers had basically come up with this tactic to request a bunch of tickets and make it seem like there was a bunch of demand for this event when there really wasn't. So Trump team had to waste resources and energy and frankly just embarrass themselves by touting how big this rally was going to be, when in reality it was just a bunch of teens who didn't want to show up at all. That being said, people didn't show up. And I think that that's kind of disconnected from the fact that all these tickets were requested. It's not like the tickets weren't available. You could request as many as you wanted, but people didn't show up. So those are kind of different issues. I think the fact that people didn't show up is very interesting. I think it kind of shows that maybe a lot of people are actually concerned about coronavirus and don't want to be packed into an arena, and are taking that seriously, and that maybe they're recognizing that this person who ran on talking about the issues that were important to them and then has done nothing to actually enact anything. I think they're realizing that he is not what he even pretended to be. And, we'll see what that means come this summer and fall. I don't think that means that we can't do the work to get him out of office, I think we absolutely still have to do that. But I think a lot of people enjoyed seeing their team kind of embarrassed. All right. I feel bad that I like kicked the dog out now, because maybe it would actually be nice to bring him up. Looks like I'm out of questions though. If anyone's got anything else, if not, we can wrap it up here. Sorry for the puppy fight that I got into. You know, he's still learning. He's only about 5 months old, this guy, so we're still figuring out how to be a dog. He probably just really needed to go out, but I can't leave you guys hanging, so anyway. All right, well, thanks everybody. Great questions as always. We are coming up on our end of quarter fundraising deadline. So this is going to be our final quarter of the primary campaign. So what's going to be happening? We are going to be buying merch. We're looking at like t-shirts and signs and stickers and posters. So absolutely, please donate to help us fund that initiative. We're also hiring more organizers, like I mentioned at the beginning. So please help us fund that. And we are going to continue ramping up digital advertising. So all of the donations that you make to our campaign, that's what they go to. They go to paying our staff, getting merch out so people see our name, and getting ads out so people see our name and what we're fighting for. So it's money that's well spent. You know, like I said, we're not paying pollsters, we're not paying consultants. We are paying people to speak directly to you, and what they hear comes back to me, and we bake that into the platform. We make changes. We talk about how we can do a better job of connecting with people. So when you give $1 to this campaign, like, it goes directly to voter contact. So please consider making a donation. You could do that at justfordelaware.com/donate. We are looking to raise another $12,000 before the end of our quarter, which is about 8 days away. So we're about a week away. So please help us do that. If you're able to donate, please chip in, ask your friends to donate, share links as well. All of that is so valuable. I think people sometimes think that sharing on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram doesn't necessarily matter, but it really does. People have found our campaign that way. So anything that you are willing to share, if you make a donation, let people know. Absolutely helps us. And the other way you can really help is to sign up to volunteer. Right now, we are still phone banking exclusively. We are looking at getting back out to canvassing, but we want to make sure that it's safe. We were going to wait and see kind of what happened with coronavirus cases as the state started to reopen. So right now, you can help us phone bank. We're doing it 8 hours a day, basically, from 12 to 8 at least every day. It's a really great way to have conversations and to find people who believe the things that you do and want to fight for the same things that you do, and to talk to them about this opportunity to do that. So if you want to volunteer, you can sign up to do that at justfordelaware.com/volunteer. And I hope to see you at our next team meeting. If there's anything else that you're curious about in the meantime, definitely leave a comment, send us a message, tweet us, Instagram, wherever, and we'll either answer it there or we'll answer it next Monday during our next live stream. So thanks so much for all your questions. Thanks for your patience with Oscar, my dog. I apologize, and I hope you all have a great evening. All right, bye.